Well, hey everyone, we are in Luke chapter 7 as we continue to work our way through the miracles of Jesus during these daily devotionals. And this miracle actually happens right after the miracle we discussed at church on Sunday of the healing of the Roman centurion's servant. And so we pick up the story in verse 11 of chapter 7. Soon afterward, Jesus went with his disciples to the village of Nain, and a large crowd followed him. And so many people that had probably heard about the healing of the Roman centurion's servant followed Jesus from Capernaum a few miles to the village of Nain. A funeral procession was coming out of as they approached the village gate. And the young man who had died was a widow's only son, and a large crowd from the village was with her. And so I want you to picture this scene. I want you to picture this large crowd with Jesus, being led by Jesus, and this other crowd coming out of the village being led by this bereaved widow who has just lost her only son. And I want you to put yourself in this woman's shoes, because this was, obviously any death is awful, but this represented her future. What her son, her only son that lay in that coffin, because she's a widow in a patriarchal society, this was her future. The best that she could hope for would be that she didn't end up on the streets. And so she's in this it's just awful, this horrible circumstance. And Jesus just happens to arrive right when they are coming out of the city, at the city gate. And when the Lord saw her, his heart overflowed with compassion. See, what you're going to see this, as you've already seen in the miracles of Jesus, so often faith is involved, but in this case, it's just Jesus's compassion. He sees this woman. He probably understands what's going on as he looks at this picture, and he sees what's happening. And his heart overflows with compassion. He says, "Don't cry." And then he walked over to the coffin and touched it. Now, you're not supposed to do that. In the Jewish culture, if you touched anything that was connected to a dead person, you were considered unclean for a week. And so this was like, you don't do that. You just don't, unless you're a family member, you don't go anywhere near the coffin or the bearers that are carrying the coffin. And so when he walked over and he touches the coffin, of course, the bearers, they stop. And then listen to this. "Young man," he said, "I tell you, get up." And then the dead boy sat up and began to talk. And Jesus gave him back to his mother. Now, before we finish up this story, who did Jesus have compassion for? Did he have compassion for the boy in the coffin or for the widow who lost her son? You might say both, but if you read in the original language, his compassion is absolutely directed at the widow, at the mom. Because he understands that this life isn't all there is, and that death is only, the progression into the next phase of life. He often doesn't weep for those who have died, but he always weeps for those who remain, because of the grief that they experience, because of the pain that they experience. And so when this happens, great fear or awe, that's what that word really means, swept the crowd, and they praised God, saying, "A mighty prophet has risen among us, and God has visited his people today." And the news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding countryside. So what's happening here is that Luke is connecting this miracle that Jesus just performed with the miracles that Elijah and Elisha had done in the Old Testament, where they had raised people from the dead. And he's connecting this. He's like this, and the people are connecting this. Like this is happening. We're living in this moment. And so as we apply this miracle to our own lives, I want to ask you, which crowd are you in today? There's no right or wrong answer to this. Maybe you're in the crowd that's following Jesus, and you're so filled with hope and anticipation of what he might do next. And you're like, yeah, this is great. He just came off of this other miracle, and it's like, this is amazing. Or maybe you're the other crowd that's grieving with people in your community. Or maybe you're the mom. Maybe you're the one who feels like your dreams have died and there's no hope for a future. And I can tell you, whichever crowd you're in, Jesus is there with you. I know this because I've experienced both crowds, and I've been in both crowds. And I know that his presence is there, ready to meet us right where we're at. Would you allow him today, wherever you're at, would you allow him to come near to you and touch those places of brokenness or celebration, and let him be a part of your life with you. Right now, just ask him, Jesus, come into my situation. You know what's going on in my life. Come into my situation and show me who you are today. Help me to experience your presence and your love. Have a great day, you guys.